Phil Knight, the co-founder of Nike, or Nike, however you want to say it, billionaire businessman, a man who just wanted to start selling running shoes and turned it into a global empire. This book, it's his memoir, his story on how Nike began, the story of a fearless pursuit of a goal. And in this video, I'm going to look at what I've learned from the co-founder of Nike. While reading this book, there were 6 main things that stood out to me. So let's go through them. Number 1, balancing family and work. One of the more tragic parts of this book is how Matthew, Phil Knight's oldest son, tragically dies at the age of just 34. And what's even worse is throughout this book, he openly admits how into his sort of late teenage years onwards, he did not have the best relationship with Matthew. And even before this event is revealed in the book, there's so many different little references right from, when Matthew's first born up until this moment where he clearly regrets not spending enough time with his kids. The business was born just before Matthew was born, and it seemed to be the thing that consumed most of his time. And what is really obvious to the reader, even if he doesn't openly say it, the message that comes across is that there is regret. Not a regret for starting the business, he makes that clear at the end of the book, but regret that he didn't get his work-family life balance correct. And for me, family is really important. My marriage is really important. When I have kids, I want to be there whenever I can be. I want them to be my priority. And so I think this really hit home. And actually, I can sit here on my high horse saying, oh, look, he didn't get this right. He didn't spend enough time with his kids. But actually, I've never been through that. However, I want to take it as a learning experience as I go into, continuing my married life. And as we look to have kids in the future, I want to get this right. Number 2, the fear of failure, or his lack of. I think one of the things that I admire most about this story and this memoir is how Knight just seems to have no fear of failure. Or at least, maybe he did, but he never let it got the best of him. At the age of 24, he travelled the world by himself. And we're not talking about a world, in 2021 or 22 now, where it's pretty easy to travel, COVID allowing. But we're talking like 60 years ago, and we're talking 20 years after the USA had just been at war with Japan, and he decided to travel the world, then head to Japan, just off a hunch to try and find some businessmen to do business with. This guy he seemed fearless, or at least when I compare him to myself, he seems that way. Throughout this story, he just never seems to let fear hold him back. And he may obviously be putting the best parts in, but I think it's really admirable. And I just want to read this quote, which I think really summarizes this well. And so it says, "The art of competing I'd learned from track was the art of forgetting. And now I reminded myself of that fact. You must forget your limits. You must forget your doubts, your pain, your past. You must forget that internal voice screaming, begging, not one more step. And when it's not possible to forget it, you must negotiate with it." I think that is just the most incredible mindset, not just about failure, but about anything. You've got to forget your limits and you've got to pursue what you're after. Number 3, he took risks on people. This I absolutely love, and it's a theme again throughout this book, is Knight was willing to take risks on people. And what I mean by this is he employed people and he trusted them. He let them do their thing. He let them pursue their passions, and it was so beneficial to him and the company. It would have been so easy for him to micromanage, especially since Nike on Blue Ribbon was pretty much his baby. But what he did is he invited people in. He said, hey, come be part of this. Come give yourself to it. And he trusted them, and he got the best out of people by doing that. He just let people be themselves, he let them loose, and he took risks on people, and man, did it pay off. Number 4, now this is kind of the only negative of these 6, but he wasn't very good at praise. this was something that really stood out to me, and it was quite a bizarre theme in this book that actually he notices that in himself. At different points he mentions how he never said thank you to this person, or he didn't praise them for what they did. And the whole time I was reading, I was almost like sat in anticipation, waiting like, is this gonna come and bite him in the future? Is this gonna come back and he's gonna, pay for the lack of praise he gave people? But it never seemed to happen. But I think this would be my main criticism while reading this book is, yes, he was incredibly successful, but actually a value I have and I think is really important in leadership is to give people praise when they deserve it. And even when they don't deserve it, I think there's times for praise and especially saying thank you. And I'm sure he did praise people. I'm sure he did say thank you, and it's just slipped from his memory. But I think it is significant because it's so easy not to. It's so easy to take people for granted. There were people in this story, in the foundation of Nike, who gave all of themselves to this company to make his dream come true. They became part of the dream and the vision, and they deserve to be thanked. They deserve to be praised and acknowledged for what they do. Encouragement's good for anyone. Number 5, he hired people who covered his weaknesses, whether he realised that was what he was doing or not. And so 2 great examples of this are the 2 people first involved in his business, his co-founder and his first ever employee. So Bill Bowerman, the co-founder alongside Phil Knight, he was the guy who helped kickstart this project, who gave him money, who allowed him to pursue it. And actually what was really clever was Bowerman was a legend. He was one of the greatest running coaches ever. He'll go down in American history if he hasn't already. But what was significant is he knew about running shoes. It wasn't just his passion for running. He knew what he was talking about. He would craft, tear apart and make shoes for people. He had an expertise which Knight didn't. And then the second one was the first employee, which I think, if I've got this right, Jeff Johnson. He's the guy who opened the first store, who was like the real first enthusiast salesman who carried Nike through some really tough times early on. And without him, it would never have got going. And actually what he covered was that he was mental, man. He just seemed to love the business, and he went for it, and he went for it, and he went for it. Something that, Knight couldn't have done by himself, and probably didn't have the same enthusiasm in that particular way. And this was just the first 2 people he sort of employed or worked with. And what he ended up doing is he employed people who were better than him in so many different ways and in different areas. And it meant he had a team of high flyers, high performing people who loved the business. And this is such a great lesson for any businessman or just leaders, is that you can't do everything. We can't do everything ourselves. We need a team. We need people around us. We need people to cover our weaknesses and for us to cover theirs. Gather people around you who are exceptional at what you aren't. And number 6, the final one, he told the truth. Now, this went a long way with both consumers and his main money lender. And there are 2 key moments in the story, in the memoir, where this comes across. And so the first is they're at this kind of conference where they're selling shoes. Loads of brands are going and selling their products in this big conference, and it's a key opportunity. And actually it's at a big turning point for what was then Blue Ribbon, because they'd been selling tigers from this particular company they'd been getting from Japan, and now after a lot of beef and problems, they'd made their own brand of shoe, their own new thing, Nike. However, the problem was, this was literally the first batch of Nikes, and when they opened them at the conference center, they were like, we have a problem here. The quality is not good enough. These aren't gonna match up to all the other shoes that are being sold. What the heck are we gonna do? So they thought about it, they talked, and they decided, you know what, we've just gotta go for it. We're gonna sell these shoes and see what happens. And the thing is, they went for it and people loved it. And I think there was this moment, I can't remember the exact context, whether it was a runner, a coach, or a buyer, something like that. They were buying a pair of Nikes, and they asked him, why are you buying these? And he's like, well, we trust you. You know, we trust you. You've built trust through you're honest, you're authentic, and we know that, yeah, these may not be the best quality now, but in the future they're going to be really good, and you've earned our trust. And that was all from being authentic and truthful in the way they sold things, in the way they communicated to customers and consumers. And then later on in the story, in Nike's history, when things were going pretty bad, where they were really struggling for money, you can find out about it if you read the book for yourself. I don't want to give too much away, but things were going rubbish, and their main lender at the time, this giant Japanese business firm, lender, I don't really know what to call it, but it was their lender, Nisho, absolutely loved their authenticity and their truthfulness. Even when Nike and Nike had messed up, they'd really got things wrong, their lender appreciated the fact that they were authentic and they were truthful, and so they were willing to bail them out and continue lending them money. And this is such a significant moment because without it, Nike would have gone bust. There would be no more Nike. But truthfulness won the day. You know, business, not that it always is, but it doesn't have to be about deceit, tricking people, lying and manipulating to get what you want. You know, truthfulness, authenticity, realness, it really does go a long way. And so there you go. There are the 6 things I learned from this incredible book, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, his memoir on how Nike came to be. It really is a phenomenal book which you should definitely check out for yourself. There is more than 6 things you can learn, and there are going to be other things which really stand out to you while you read this book. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a like below, subscribing to my channel, maybe sharing with a friend or a family member who you think could learn something from this. I've been Ash Porter. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.